I'm going to start this episode off with some alarming statistics as to why people leave their jobs. According to recent research, and I'll link it out in the episode description, 27% of employees quit because of their dissatisfaction with their manager or supervisor. That's 1 in 4 people-ish. So if you've ever been in a job where you relate to that, you know it can break you, even if you love the work that you do. You might love the perks, you might love the benefits, but your mental health is basically non existent. Your personal relationships hanging by a thread. At some point, you realize you're grinding for a paycheck, and you look in the mirror and suddenly you don't even recognize yourself anymore. Been there, done that, got a t-shirt. It is not fun. Now, I'm going to throw another scenario at you. So you don't necessarily love your job, and maybe the work isn't the most stimulating in the world, but your boss or your manager is a treasure that should be protected at all costs. They go up to bat for you. They defend your work. They can literally sense you having a bad day at 9:01 a.m. and they're like, pause. You've had a long week. You're doing too much. Take the rest of the day off. And you're like, maybe this place isn't so bad. Maybe I'll stick it out for a little while longer because they challenge me, they believe in me, and I'm inspired to do my best work. And maybe that could lead to better opportunities. If that's your current situation, go ahead and stop this podcast and treat yourself to a celebratory matcha because congratulations, you've won the manager lottery. No, just kidding. Please stay. It'll be worth it, I promise. Anyway, if you don't have the best vibes with your manager, what if I told you that there was a way that you can approach your working relationship to make your life infinitely better? You know what? You're going to want to enjoy that celebratory matcha because at the end of this episode, you're going to have all the tools to completely change how you work with your manager and how your manager works with you. You will be able to confidently influence the way that they work with you so you can set yourself up for success, and it'll be like you accidentally became important at work. Yeah, that's a thing. Let's get this party started. Cue the music.
Hey there, I'm Melody Bose, your host of Jeans with a Blazer, a podcast about rewriting the rules of work and life.
So the title of this episode, How to Train Your Manager, sounds a bit condescending, but just to be clear, that's not what I mean. The whole idea is to understand the person that you work with better, who is ultimately in charge of a lot of things that can have a direct impact on your job, like your workload, the opportunities you get to move up, your visibility to the higher powers that be, and the quality of your everyday. So when I propose the idea of training your manager, what I'm actually suggesting is to train yourself. It's really about training yourself so that you can better understand them and communicate with them so that it ultimately benefits you. Now, I've been a manager in previous roles, and I did my absolute best to give my direct reports to my employees the best possible experience and to treat them with respect and tune into their needs and genuinely help them grow. And coming from an employee's perspective, having managers, I've realized that there's sort of a code or a language in working with managers. And while you can't ultimately fix a bad manager, because you are in control of how you respond to your immediate environment, there are some things you can do that just makes your life, and by extension, their life, that is the key word, pay attention, their life, better across the board. I have some amazing techniques to share with you, and these will absolutely rock your world. But just like life, not everything is that simple, especially when you are dealing with the complexities of human nature. So make sure you stick around for the whole episode because I'm also going to walk you through some specific manager types and plugging in those strategies with real-world examples to work with each of them on an individual level. Spoiler alert, I've identified 8 different types of managers, and some can be a combination of 2 or more, so buckle up. And for all my visual learners out there, I created this cheat sheet that is completely free. It's a little downloadable with this episode that lists out all of these and even more that didn't make it to the episode. I'll link it out in the description, so be sure to check that out if that suits your fancy. So before I go into all the different methods of training your manager, context is really important. And I think it also makes sense just to kind of paint the complete picture here. So here are a few things that one should know about managers as a whole. There are definitely good managers, there are definitely bad managers, and there are horrible managers. And sometimes, I'm not making excuses, but sometimes if they're a bad or horrible manager, it's not necessarily their fault. I'll explain. The job of a manager is to get results from their team that directly aligns with the overall goals of the organization. And part of their responsibilities include things like setting direction for the overall team, developing their team and helping them grow, and removing obstacles and improving processes. Sometimes individuals are put into manager roles because they've performed really well, but just because they're a hardworking individual, they're an excellent employee, it doesn't necessarily make them a good manager. Guys, it is a completely different skill set. And if you've ever had a manager that's just a good person and is just super empathetic and compassionate, but their feedback isn't always clear and you always feel a little bit lost on your projects, that could be failure by design. And that is on the company. Also important to know, there are a lot of companies out there that do a really poor job of training managers. Some organizations just don't have the budget to do that. It's this whole kind of infrastructure ecosystem that I think some companies just don't think about, have the funds, care about, want to, but don't know how to go about it. There's a lot at play here. Now, another thing to consider is your manager is likely having conversations about the bigger picture direction of the department, the organization, or the projects that you work on that you are blissfully, wholly unaware of. A good manager, of course, should be transparent with what's going on and clue you in on the high level, giving you the excerpts from those bigger conversations, but sometimes they might not be able to communicate those details for a variety of reasons. Maybe it is top secret, I don't know. Sometimes it's because they don't even get the full details as well. But if you've ever been working on a project and asked yourself, why am I doing this? I am completely lost. This doesn't align with my goals or the overall vision or the company. Like, I'm just not getting it. It may be revealed to you at some point, or maybe not. It's frustrating, but sometimes that's just how it is. Sometimes working on a job or at a job feels like you're on side quest after side quest and you lose the plot at some point. Everyone does. And finally, managers are human. They make mistakes too. Because they have things going on, sometimes stuff slips through the cracks, or suddenly their lack of planning becomes an emergency that gets passed down onto you. And that's a bummer, but it happens. Now, to be clear, them having a bad day does not make it okay for them to treat you poorly. But if you've ever overanalyzed why they responded to your email or your Slack with one word like, okay, thanks, you have no idea what's going on their end. And, maybe their boss just chewed them out, or maybe they have something crazy going on in their personal life. Don't overthink it. Sometimes it's just not about you. Okay, caveats over. Now, here is where it gets fun. This is the part where I share the strategies I have learned, sometimes the hard way, that can really change how you work with your manager. Method 1. So, just like in all relationships, communication is the most blatant, obvious quality of success. And if you're not gelling with your manager, I'd start with the most obvious crack in the foundation, understanding their communication style. That's method number 1. Ask yourself, do you know how they like to be communicated with? And do you deliver in those ways? Now, most good managers should either identify the best communication style that works for you or communicate the style that works for them up front. But sometimes that's just not the hand of cards that you're given. So you will thank yourself by figuring that out. The sooner the better. It's more than just communication style. It's how they like to be communicated with information. So the best way to do that is just by asking them. But I get it. If that feels awkward, like what if you're 2 years in at this point and you're working for them as opposed to being on day 2 or week 2 of the job? I get it. So if you are new, ask them how they prefer their updates in Slack, email, or a call, and then ask them about the level of detail. Do they prefer high-level updates or deep dive reports? If they say high level, ask them to clarify what that means, because that could either be a email weekly recap with like 3 bullet points or a 47-page deck with your findings and milestones. You just don't know until you know. And if you don't want to ask them, if you don't want to go there, you can try just observing them for a week or two of how they share information and how they respond to how you share yours. And then adjust your approach accordingly. And then start sprinkling in those questions, okay? Sprinkle in those discovery questions like, hey, for this new project, is it cool if I give you a quick recap or keep you included on every single communication? This works because you're taking that extra step of catering to them. Oh, you thought a manager's job was to support you and your growth? Okay, yes, technically, but really your job is to support them. Because here's the thing, sometimes they are going to war with leadership or other departments, and they might be out there fighting battles that you don't even see, okay? They might be struggling to keep the department from sinking, and if you can accommodate them, they will remember. And also, every single thing that you do is a direct reflection on them. So make them look good, even if you are absolutely just seething, cringing inside. Method number 2. This is probably my favorite method for creating a better dynamic with your manager. It is called the rule of threes. At some point in your job, you are going to run into a challenge that creates a block where you're unsure of what the right thing to do is. You know your manager either has the answer or they're going to figure out the answer, right? But before you rush to that email or that Slack, pause, pump the brakes, and come up with 3 solutions to the problem before bringing it up. For example, let's say that you notice that your team is over budget for the quarter. Maybe you're in charge of finances. There are some spending decisions that need to be made. You could reach out to your manager and let them know, and then leave them up to their own devices to decide what's next, because ultimately the decision does fall on them. Or you could propose some suggestions like, hey boss, how about this? We could delay some non-critical spending until next quarter. We could reallocate funds from a lower priority project. Or we can implement some small cost-saving measures across the team to balance the budget. This method works because you are giving your manager a gift that they rarely get. And that gift is that you are making their life easier. And the less that they have to think because they trust you to do that thinking, the better off you'll be. Now, okay, let's be real. Sometimes you will have a manager that doesn't like any of the solutions that you bring them, and you end up doing more work trying to appease them. In that case, you're just building up your karmic reservoir. But generally, if you anticipate the solutions before they have to extract themselves from that spreadsheet from hell that's due by the end of the day and figure it out themselves, you are the golden goose, baby. You know what? I think there's actually research somewhere that actually says for every solution an employee anticipates before their manager has to ask, a puppy is born to a loving home. Do it for the puppies. All right, next. Be annoying. Ask the annoying questions. How many times have you been given a task or a project without much context or direction, and you've felt weird because you're like, am I just supposed to know what to do here? But sometimes they might be forgetting key, very important details that you need to do your job. Another scenario, raise your hand if you've ever been working really hard on a project and you're halfway through and you get asked for an update and you're like, blah, 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 here's the update. And you had to start over because you just took orders like a busy little working bee and you didn't stop to question everything. And it turns out you were wrong, all wrong. And you felt this big after work, and you drove home at the end of the day in complete silence, no music, no podcast, no audiobooks, no FaceTiming your BFF, not even to vent because you were so shook at the audacity of the situation and spiraling into a mini existential crisis, questioning every single decision that you've made. I'm raising my hand for everyone who is listening and not watching if it wasn't already completely obvious. Okay, so we want to avoid all of that. And a great way to do that is to be annoying and ask the annoying questions. Here they are. You're welcome. What is the overall objective for this project, aka what bigger picture are we trying to achieve that aligns with the overall business goals? This asks the why for the project, which is probably the most important question to ask. And if they don't know, keep digging, because if they don't know, you can't know, so you can figure it out together. It can be like a little bonding activity. Are there any related projects that have already been approved or produced? Okay, this helps prevent duplication of efforts, because if Chelsea in B2B has already created those marketing assets for a campaign last quarter, we don't need to do it again. And then maybe there's something that we can repurpose or draw inspiration from. If your manager doesn't know, ask them for the name of someone who does and follow that trail and figure it out. You must. Is this part of a larger campaign or a broader goal? This gives you an idea of the direction and the voice tone on something that's part of something bigger versus just a one-off task that you need to just whip up from scratch. Do you have any previous examples that align with your vision for this? Maybe there is a PowerPoint or something that exists that's similar. Then follow up with, is there anything in this example that you particularly liked and want to see? How about something that you didn't like and you don't want to see? What is the format in which you would like to receive the final project? Self-explanatory. Is there anyone else or other departments that have been involved with this project that I need to connect with to see this to completion? Okay, this gives a more complete idea of the scope of work involved so that you can start organizing your time. Are there any stakeholders who need to be involved in the review process? And last but not least, what is the deadline? Also self-explanatory. And you can follow all of that up by sharing your working style and saying, I work best when I have XYZ so that I can deliver faster and better. It might feel annoying to ask all of these and have all these full stops before actually starting to work on something. But I promise anyone who works with you is going to eventually anticipate that you're going to be asking these questions. And eventually, maybe they'll catch on, and who knows, they might even provide everything up front from the beginning. And this also makes you look good because you might spot problems in the beginning that no one else did, and you win. Look at you. You are practically a manager whisperer. I'm going to darken jar that because I didn't like the way that it sounded, and I don't know why. So, anyway, like I mentioned before, these methods are a solid foundational point, but you can't just take general advice because we all know it doesn't apply to everyone all the time in the same scenarios. I would be doing you dirty if I just left you with those 3 pieces of advice, and that's not how I do things. So let's take it a step further and really fine tune the way that you handle your manager by understanding what type of manager you're dealing with. I also mentioned a downloadable cheat sheet. I have that for you in the description, blah, 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 but let's get to it. Okay, the first type of manager is unfortunately probably the one that you can think of right on the top of your head. It is the micromanager. These are arguably the worst type of manager because they are breathing down your neck. They want to be CC'd on every single email. They're constantly checking in. These are the types where you feel like you are never doing anything right, and it can feel hopeless. So, what can you do? Not much, but what you can try to do is first and foremost, be hyper transparent. Send proactive updates with timelines and progress reports. For example, instead of waiting for your manager to ask for the weekly update, send a Monday morning summary of what you'll tackle, Tuesday's progress and Wednesday's blockers. Just list it all out. Next, be organized. They will ask you for that one 50-page report from last year that had that one stat that they want you to put somewhere in this presentation that they want you to work on. Have detailed email folders, and I mean excruciatingly detailed. In every single email to them, keep your subject lines succinct and to the point, and approach every single conversation with an objective, a call to action, and a follow-up recap. And then, of course, give small little wins. You want to show that you can handle responsibility even if they don't fully believe it ever. But these small little wins slowly build trust, and that is ultimately the goal there. Okay, next we have the macro manager. And the macro manager lets employees run projects independently, and sometimes they might seem distant or unresponsive. And this seems like the best possible scenario to have. But hold on, it's not as good as it seems because it requires you to be super, super independent and oftentimes psychic. So, how do you approach this? Be proactive. Give status updates before they ask. I know this is starting to sound a bit familiar, but trust me on this. So, for example, you can have a weekly email that says, this week's milestone, completed X, in progress Y, asking for feedback on Z. Set clear goals and checkpoints. You want to keep alignment with them without needing their daily guidance because chances are they might not even be able to provide it to you. Example, suggest 15-minute check-ins to discuss priorities and adjust as needed. You're not taking up too much of their time. You have a clear objective, so there's not enough time to kind of just float out into the ether. And then, of course, take initiative. Okay, propose solutions or improvements. For example, if you notice a process bottleneck, draft a proposal for streamlining it and ask for their input rather than waiting for instructions because you're going to have to be the one to keep that train moving. Next, the analytical and data-driven manager. Okay, so this individual, they make decisions based on facts, numbers, analysis. Rumor has it they've never even shed a tear, not a single one, not even when their child was born. And they don't run on emotions, they run on quad espresso shots and pie charts. They know more Excel sheet formulas than you can name. Think Bryce Dallas Howard from Jurassic World. They are not dinosaurs, they are assets. The good news is they don't see things as good or bad, they just see things as data points. So when you can speak to them in numbers and percentages, you're safe-ish. So how do you deal with this? You want to bring data-backed solutions, metrics, KPIs, All the buzzwords, but make sure they have substance to them. You want all of this to be able to win their confidence because this is ultimately a manager that's an extreme sport. They might appreciate these long, detailed reports because they are the type that leaves no stone unturned. Example, instead of saying our ad campaign isn't working, show engagement stats, conversion rates, and benchmark comparisons to be able to back up your conclusion and ultimately your next steps. You'll also want to avoid vague statements. Okay, be precise, be structured. Example, bullet points, problem, proposed solution, predicted outcome, next steps. No fluff, none of that, just keep it moving. I've kind of talked about anticipating solutions, but with this type of manager, you want to anticipate questions. Prepare visuals, charts, or summaries just for quick comprehension. For example, bring a one-slide chart to a meeting showing the projected ROI based on your proposed solution. Buzzwords, buzzwords, buzzwords with substance. Next, we have the visionary. With the right tools, they could end world hunger. They could also sell an igloo to an Eskimo. However, these types of managers focus on strategy and overall goals, and because of this, the details may be completely lost on them. They know exactly how many ducks could fit in the Empire State Building, but they can't be bothered to remember to renew their car registration. They speak in abstract figures and vague space and time. They might be an Aquarius. So how do you approach this? You got to bring them back down to earth, okay? You have to provide concise summaries with action items. And you want clarity without micromanaging. You do not want to micromanage your manager or give that impression off at all, ever. Don't do that, never. Okay, for example, instead of walking them through every single task, summarize. Our team's next milestone is X. Here are 3 actions to achieve it, A, B, and C. Cool. Then you want to highlight the impact on vision. You want to show how your work contributes to long-term goals. They typically want people to hype them up and share their big picture vision. So make sure you can speak to that, whatever that is. Example, they want to create the best website in the world. You say, we can create the best website in the world. How we can do that is by implementing this feature, which will increase our retention by 20%, supporting our strategic focus on customer loyalty. Now you're speaking their language. And then the last tip for this type of manager is focus on outcomes, not process. Okay, they prefer results and they don't care how you get them. So just figure it out, bring that to them. Next, we have the people-oriented relational manager. This type of manager, they value relationships, team cohesion, and employee well-being. These are usually just treats of humans. And they remember things like your mom's birthday and they have your back. And they also lead with the heart, not necessarily the mind, but that is what makes them so effective. So, how do you approach this relationship? Okay, so communicating human to human is key here. You want to share wins and challenges in relational terms. For example, our team's morale is high after the last project, but they're feeling stretched with overlapping deadlines. Can we adjust priorities? Next, you want to show emotional intelligence. So, these are some of the most emotionally intelligent human beings you will ever meet, and they have a radar for it. They will be able to recognize that in you, so you have to be able to step up and demonstrate that. A good way to do this is to offer support for teammates struggling without waiting to be asked. Just jump right in there, be a team player. All that good stuff. You also want to be collaborative and empathetic. So loyalty and care is your currency here. For example, ask for feedback. How can I support your vision while also helping the team stay balanced, right? So think of it just as a balancing scale. You want to, of course, contribute to the bigger picture vision, but also the team dynamics and the interpersonal relationships are important to this type of manager. So showing that you can do that effectively is just only going to make you look good. Next, we have the results-oriented, task-focused manager. This sounds similar to the analytical manager, but there's a key difference here. Okay, so the traits for this manager prioritizes deliverables and outcomes over processes or relationships. How do we approach this? Be efficient and clear. Focus on deadlines, deliverables, and progress. For example, you'll want to use a structured format in your communication, especially for any kind of project management. Completed, in progress, next steps. Keep it simple. And this is the key difference from the analytical manager. Keep interactions short. Where the analytical manager likes detailed reports and chit chat and diving in really deep into the weeds, this type of manager prefers quick structured updates over detailed reports. They don't have time, just get it done. So, one way to approach this is look at the different meetings that you have with them and ask yourself, do you really need a 30-minute meeting to accomplish this? Or will literally a 5-minute check in suffice? They will appreciate that to no bounds. And then you'll want to highlight measurable impact. Show results in tangible terms, make it easy. Are the arrows green and pointing up? Good, keep doing that. Next, we have the transformational inspirational manager. Every meeting with this manager feels like a TED Talk, and every meeting you have with them goes at least 20 minutes over every single time without fail. Sometimes you might walk away with still like 12 things left on your to-do list that you still needed to discuss and you need their input on, but they know all of your childhood traumas and have suggestions for how to work through them. The traits of this type of manager motivates and inspires, and they focus on innovation and development. The key to understanding this manager is that they don't just want you to take orders and follow them. They appreciate when you challenge typical ways of thinking and offer innovative solutions. So, how to approach this? They love problem solvers with vision. So, coming up with innovative solutions and not the most obvious. For example, be the idea guy or gal. Propose a new idea for improving processes or exploring emerging trends in your industry. They love discussing that because it keeps them in the know, it keeps you in the know, and together you grow. Next, you'll want to connect your work to your growth. So tie tasks to bigger opportunities. They want your work to fuel you. It might not, but if you can communicate what you've learned from your failures or discovered good opportunities, good job. And then the last thing to know for this type of manager is be open to learning and feedback. They love mentoring high potential employees. So this is awesome because they want to see you win. For example, ask for advice on career development or ways to improve processes. If you're getting their feedback, they feel like they're learning too, and they feel like they're giving back, which ultimately is a big part of their value system. And then last, certainly not least, but finally, we have the crisis firefighter manager. Okay, these types of managers are in full crisis mode all the time. They run on pure adrenaline because they are always having to fix things and they can create a very chaotic environment. Sometimes you just have to hang on for dear life. So, how do you handle this? Create your own peace, first and foremost, and then be the source of peace for them. So, by helping prioritizing tasks or bringing clarity among chaos, for example, if there's a lot going on your team, you could present a clear list of urgent versus important tasks to prevent overload on them. Next, stability, stability, stability. If you can provide them with moments of calm in a reactive environment, they will be your best friend. Okay, they are used to coming up with solutions A through Z. So if you can offer that to them and sort of be their anchor and detail oriented, they will love you because of it. And soon enough, you'll become accidentally important. So, when you take the time to read your manager and anticipate their needs and present options, you are showing them that you are someone you can count on, which is ultimately the goal here. Do this consistently, and suddenly you are the person that everyone turns to and the one who makes an impact, and the individual that no team can imagine working without. So, guys, I would love to hear your manager horror stories or any tips that you've had that you think would be helpful. Let me know in the comments or send them to me in a DM. I would love to hear from you. I'll see you next week.
That's a wrap on this episode of Jeans with a Blazer. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, a mindset shift, or just the push you needed, do me a favor. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Leave a review wherever you enjoy your podcasts. It helps more people find it, and it keeps these conversations going. And I love hearing from you. Follow at Jeans with a Blazer and tag me with your biggest takeaways, your latest wins, or just tell me what topics you want to hear about next. See you next time.